Hey, so get this. Imagine waking up one morning in the winter of 1886 on the western frontier. Totally normal day, fixing up the fire and making coffee, having no idea that in just a few months you'd be facing the deadliest winter anyone out here had ever seen. The kind of cold that could kill you in your sleep, freeze your cattle standing up in the fields, and turn wagon wheels into brittle statues of ice. A winter so brutal that entire families would vanish beneath snowdrifts taller than their cabins. Oh, and if you're enjoying these stories, I'd really appreciate a like or subscribe. Super curious where you're all listening from, so drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. It always blows my mind how people are falling asleep to this all over the world. Alright, find that cozy spot, take a nice slow breath and just let your body sink into whatever you're lying on. We're heading back to the Wild West in the 1880s, and trust me, you're going to be so grateful for that warm blanket and the solid roof over your head. So, congratulations! You just woke up in the winter of 1886, on the western frontier. Your eyes open slowly to a world of half-light, where the pale dawn struggles to push through frost-coated windows. The air inside your cabin feels almost colder than outside, sharp in your lungs, biting enough to make your nose sting with every breath. Your bed isn't much comfort, just a straw-filled mattress, the ticking rough against your skin, the blanket pulled tight but never quite enough. The first thing you notice is the silence. Not the peaceful kind, but a muffled, heavy stillness, as if the snow has swallowed every sound and left you stranded in a world that no longer moves. Your breath drifts up like smoke, pale against the dim rafters, and even before you rise, you know the battle waiting for you, the battle to keep warm, to keep alive, to see another morning. You push back the quilt and the floor greets you with ice. The boards are stiff with frost, the gaps between them seeping the night's cold straight into your bones. Every step makes you wince, but there's no time to linger. The stove in the corner sits quiet, dark, the fire gone to ash sometime in the night. You move toward it quickly, hands trembling as you reach for kindling. You can almost feel the cold reaching out from the iron belly of the stove, mocking you for letting it die. Your fingers are stiff, clumsy as you strike flint against steel, sparks falling into the dry curls of shavings. For a moment it seems hopeless, the flame catching, then fading, as if the cold itself is fighting back. But at last it holds, licking upward, the glow spreading through the wood, and you feed it carefully, coaxing the fire into life. The first crackle feels like victory. The orange light paints the walls, and already the cabin feels less like a coffin of ice and more like a shelter again. The frost on the window panes begins to weep, tiny rivulets running down the glass. You crouch close, holding your hands out, the heat biting your skin in sharp contrast to the freezing air behind you. It's a small win, but it's everything. Without that fire, the cabin is just a box waiting to bury you in snow. Outside, you know the world is no softer. The snow lies deep across the plains, drifts piled against the door, fences buried, wagon tracks long vanished. The cattle will be waiting for you, their hides rimed with frost, their breath steaming like smoke in the pale air. The horses, too, restless and stamping in the shed, their water frozen solid in the trough. The cold shows no mercy to man or beast. For now, though, you breathe slower, letting the warmth seep back into your fingers, into your chest. The morning frost has made its claim, but you've beaten it for one more hour. And out here, on the edge of the Wild West, survival is nothing more than a string of hours, stitched together by fire, grit, and the will to see the sun rise again. You step outside, and the cold greets you like a fist. The air is sharp, so sharp it feels alive, cutting your throat with every breath. Snow crunches beneath your boots, brittle and dry, each step echoing too loudly in the morning stillness. The sky is pale, a flat grey stretched across the horizon, and the land feels endless, empty, as though winter itself has claimed it for its own. Your axe waits where you left it yesterday, buried halfway in a stump. The handle is rough against your hand, worn smooth where your palms have gripped it too many times to count. It's more than a tool, it's your lifeline. Without wood, there is no fire. Without fire, there is no survival. You heft it over your shoulder, and the weight feels heavier than it should, as though the cold has seeped into the wood itself. The trees stand like sentinels at the edge of the clearing, their branches heavy with snow. You trudge toward them, each step sinking deep, your legs straining as though the snow itself wants to hold you back. Your breath comes hard, drifting in long plumes behind you. The silence presses in, broken only by the sound of your boots and the distant groan of trees shifting under the burden of ice. At the base of a pine, you plant your feet wide and raise the axe. The first strike rings sharp, a sound that startles the still air, sending a flock of crows bursting into the sky. Chips of frozen wood spray outward, and you strike again and again until your muscles ache and your breath fogs thick around you. Each swing is a reminder that warmth doesn't come free. Every log you'll burn tonight is paid for in sweat, in muscle, in sheer willpower. When the tree finally creaks and falls, it crashes into the snow with a muffled thunder, the sound swallowed almost instantly by the drifts. You pause, leaning on the axe handle, chest heaving, sweat freezing against your brow. The silence returns, heavier than before, but now it feels different earned. You set to work cutting the trunk into pieces small enough to carry. Each log is awkward, heavy, but you haul them one by one back to the cabin, stacking them neatly against the wall. The pile grows slowly, but never feels high enough. Out here, wood is never just wood, it's hours of life, banked against the hunger of the cold. By the time the sun creeps higher, your arms are leaden, your back sore, and your breath burns in your chest. Still, the sight of the stacked wood gives you a flicker of pride, a fragile kind of security. You run your gloved hand along the rough edges, knowing each piece will soon feed the fire, turning to light, to warmth, to survival. The cold hasn't let you win, not really. It will be back tonight, and tomorrow, and the day after, relentless as ever. But for now, you've stolen something from it. For now, you've earned another night of heat, another night of life on the frozen frontier. You push the cabin door open, and the world greets you in a rush of light and ice. The cold spills in like water, flooding your lungs before you even step out. Your breath catches, sharp and painful, and for a moment it feels as though the air itself refuses to let you live in it. The Wild West in winter doesn't welcome you, it tests you. Every breath outside is a dare. The snow stretches out in every direction, a white desert without end. Drifts rise like frozen waves across the prairie, swallowing fences, burying trails, erasing every mark of man. The horizon is little more than a blur, sky and land blending into one endless sheet of pale grey. Even the sun looks weary, a weak disk smudged behind clouds, offering no warmth at all. Your boots sink deep with each step, the snow swallowing your ankles, the crunch echoing in the stillness. It is a silence. Unlike summer silence, this is heavier, suffocating, the kind that makes you feel small, swallowed by a land that doesn't care if you exist. The only sound is your breath, ragged and steaming, rising in thick plumes that drift away before dissolving into the air. You stop and let the cold settle on your face. It bites at your cheeks, seeps into your ears, needles your fingers, even through your gloves. You pull your scarf tighter, but it doesn't matter. The chill is alive, always finding a way in, and yet there's something cleansing in that first breath. The kind that clears the fog from your head, that makes you feel every part of your body at once, alive and trembling. The animals stir faintly in the distance. You can see the cattle, their hides frosted white, huddled together for warmth, their breath rising like small fires in the air. The horses stamp and snort in the lean-to, hooves cracking the ice where they stand. They too breathe the same sharp air, enduring because they must, because there is no choice. Out here, man and beast share the same battle. You walk farther, the snow squeaking beneath you, your lungs pulling in breath after breath that hurts but also steals you. It is in these moments you understand why the people who came west had to be carved from something harder than stone. The cold will strip you down, burn your lungs, freeze your blood, but in that first breath, you learn to stand against it. By the time you turn back toward the cabin, your beard is crusted with ice, your lashes heavy with frost, and your chest aches from the weight of the air. But you've done it. You've stepped outside, taken in the first breath, and made it back again. And every day, as the cold deepens and the snow piles higher, you will do it once more. The Wild West gives no easy mornings. Each breath is a reminder you are alive only because you keep fighting to be. Inside your cabin, every tool has a place, and every place feels like a lifeline. Out here, the difference between life and death isn't luck, it's the edge of an axe, the stitch of a needle, the iron of a stove. You look at them not as objects, but as companions. They carry you through the brutal cold when nothing else will. Your axe leans by the door, the handle worn smooth from your grip. It is more than wood and steel, it is the muscle in your arm, the fire in your hearth, the warmth in your bones. Without it, there is no woodpile, no flame, no survival. Each notch on the handle tells a story. The tree felled in a blizzard, the log split at dusk when your fingers were too numb to hold on. Beside the stove rests the kettle, blackened from years of smoke. It sings when the fire is strong, hissing steam into the cabin, a sound that promises water won't freeze in your cup. And yet even the kettle is fragile. Drop it on the frozen ground and it might crack. Out here, every tool must be handled like treasure because nothing can be replaced until spring, and even then, not without a long journey to town. On the table sits a sewing kit, a bundle of needles and coarse thread. At first glance, it looks humble, hardly worth noticing. But when your coat tears or your mittens unravel, those needles are the only thing standing between you and frostbite. You patch and stitch by lamplight, hands clumsy with cold, knowing every stitch is a shield against the wind that waits outside. Your boots sit near the fire, drying from yesterday's work. The leather is cracked, the soles worn thin, but they are yours. You rub them with grease when you can spare it, trying to keep the water out. A good pair of boots can carry you through drifts and storms, but a bad pair will take your toes before the season's end. Even the small things matter. A flint kept dry in a pouch, a lantern filled with the last of the kerosene, a rope coiled by the door, ready to guide you back if the storm blinds you. None of them shine with beauty, none of them inspire awe, but in the Wild West winter they are your armor. You move through the cabin, running your hand over each tool, each weapon against the cold. They remind you that survival is built, piece by piece, by what you keep ready and what you refuse to lose. In town, people might measure wealth in coins. Out here, wealth is a sharp axe, a mended coat, boots that last another season. When the cold howls outside and the wind rattles the shutters, you sit by the fire, the tools close at hand. They are not luxuries, they are survival itself. And you know, tomorrow, you'll need every single one again. Water, the simplest need, becomes the hardest battle in winter. You wake thirsty, your mouth dry from the heat of the stove, and the thought of fresh water lingers like a dream. But out here on the frozen plains, there are no wells that run easy, no taps to turn. Every drop must be wrestled from ice. You step outside with a bucket in hand, the cold slamming against your face. The trough is frozen solid, a slab of glass stretched over the water below. You strike it with the back of an axe, and the sound rings out sharp, echoing into the quiet morning. Shards splinter, flying up like broken mirrors, and for a moment you glimpse the dark water beneath. You scoop what you can, the bucket filling slowly, your breath clouding above it like smoke. The horses crowd near, snorting, their muzzles white with frost. They lean close, desperate for the water you free. When the trough freezes too deep, you turn to the creek. The path there is carved through snowbanks, your boots sinking with each step, the air roar against your cheeks. The creek itself is locked under a thick shell, ice groaning beneath your weight as you kneel. You take the axe to it, chipping until your arms ache, until at last a dark eye of water blinks open. The sound of trickling feels like music, soft, fragile, alive. You dip your bucket quick, knowing the hole will seal again by morning. But sometimes even the creek is lost, buried under drifts or sealed in ice thicker than your strength. On those days you turn to snow. It looks endless, a sea of white, but it is cruel. A pan full of snow melts down to little more than a mouthful, vanishing before your eyes. You scoop it anyway, feeding handfuls into the kettle, watching it shrink into a thin puddle over the fire. It takes patience, fuel, and time, all things you can't always spare. But thirst gives no mercy, and you drink it gratefully, the taste faintly bitter, as if the cold itself clings to it. Water barrels inside the cabin are no safer. Left unchecked, they freeze from the top down, splitting the wood with sharp cracks that echo like gunshots in the night. You learn to cover them with blankets, to keep them near the stove, to ladle from them often so they don't freeze solid. Every barrel is guarded like treasure, every drop measured out carefully. Waste nothing, that is the unspoken law. You think of summer sometimes, of creeks rushing clear, of rain falling on the roof, of rivers wide and alive. It feels like another world, almost impossible to imagine as you chip at the frozen skin of winter. Yet here you are, pulling life from ice, turning snow and frost into water, turning hardship into survival. When the bucket is finally full, you carry it back inside, arms stiff, fingers numb. You set it near the stove, watching steam rise as the ice melts from its rim. You pour a little into a tin cup, sip slow, and feel it ease the dryness in your throat. It tastes like victory, like life itself. In the Wild West winter, water is never given freely. It is fought for, earned with sweat, with fire, with stubbornness, and as you set the bucket down, you know tomorrow you'll do it all again. Because out here, water isn't just water, it is survival carved straight from the heart of the cold. The fire is your heartbeat. Without it, the cabin is nothing more than a wooden box waiting to freeze you solid. Every day begins and ends with the same ritual, feeding the hearth. It is not just about warmth, it is about survival, about keeping back the endless cold that presses against the walls, clawing to get in. You crouch before the iron stove, its black belly still faintly warm from the night. The last coals glow weakly, fragile embers clinging to life. You stir them gently with the poker, coaxing them like a farmer tending seeds. A spark jumps, a breath of orange light flickers, and you feel a flicker of relief. The fire has not died completely. You lay kindling across the embers, thin twigs and shavings, your hands careful as though you're handling something holy. Then comes the breath, slow, steady, warm air from your lungs, fanning the tiny flame until it catches. When the wood finally crackles, when smoke curls upward and the first lick of flame spreads, the sound alone soothes you. The fire pops, shifts, and grows, the room slowly filling with its light. You add larger logs one at a time, listening to the deep hiss as the frost burns off, watching the orange climb over grey bark. The stove hums as it grows hotter, a beast woken from sleep. Feeding the hearth is a constant task. A fire cannot be built and left, it must be watched, tended, respected. Every few hours, you rise from your chair or your bed to feed it again, never letting the flame fall too low. You learn the rhythm of wood, which pieces burn fast, which burn slow, which will last through the longest night. You stack the softer pine for kindling, the dense oak or elm for long burns, always thinking ahead, always guarding against the moment when the fire might falter. The stove does more than warm you. It cooks your meals, boils your water, dries your clothes stiff with frost. A kettle left near the heat steams steadily, and damp boots lean against the iron belly, soaking up its warmth. The firelight flickers across the walls, chasing away the shadows that creep close during the long nights. Without it, the cabin would drown in darkness and cold, but with it, the space feels alive, almost safe. Sometimes you sit and stare at the flames, hypnotized by the way they twist and dance. The wind outside may howl like a living thing, rattling the shutters, pressing snow against the door. But here, before the hearth, you feel a small, fragile power. The storm can rage all it wants inside. The fire holds it back. But wood is not endless. Every log burned is a reminder of the hours of labor it took to cut and haul it. You cannot waste it. A careless fire that roars too hot will devour your woodpile before the winter is halfway through. So you learn balance, feeding just enough to keep the cabin warm, rationing every stick, every ember, with the same care you ration food. As night settles again, and the world outside sinks into silence, you place one last log on the fire. You watch it catch, feel the warmth spread, and let your eyes close, knowing the hearth will carry you through until morning, and when morning comes, you will feed it again. Because out here, on the edge of the Wild West winter, the hearth is more than fire. It is the thin line between life and the cold, waiting to claim you. Step outside at dawn, and the silence is the first thing you feel. It isn't the soft quiet of a summer morning when birds chatter and insects hum. No, this is a heavier silence, thick and crushing, as though the snow itself has swallowed every sound and refuses to give them back. The land feels dead, or maybe only sleeping, but it is a sleep so deep it unnerves you. Your boots crunch against the snow, and the sound seems too loud, echoing across the frozen ground. Every movement you make feels amplified. The creak of leather, the rasp of your breath, the shifting of your coat. Beyond that, nothing. The prairie stretches wide, blanketed in white, fences buried, wagon ruts erased. Even the animals hold their peace, as though they too know that breaking the stillness would anger the cold. You pause and hold your breath. The silence presses in, almost a weight, and for a moment it feels alive. The kind of silence that makes you glance over your shoulder, certain someone is there, though you see no one. You hear your own heartbeat, faint but insistent, and realize how rare it is to be so utterly aware of yourself, of your body, of the fragile rhythm that keeps you standing in this frozen world. Inside the cabin, the silence is different. The fire cracks softly, the kettle hums, but beyond those small sounds there is the same hush. The thick snow outside muffles everything, the wind, the footsteps, even the creak of trees. You can shout into the storm and hear nothing but your own voice bouncing back, small and pitiful against the endless white. It makes you understand why some call it cabin fever, the way silence gnaws at your mind until you long for a sound, to any sound that isn't your own. Sometimes the silence is broken in sudden ways. A tree, splitting under the weight of ice, crashes into the snow with a sound like thunder. A wolf howls in the distance, the cry long and lonely, carrying for miles in the still air. These moments jar you, remind you the land is not dead, only waiting. But once the sound fades, the silence swallows it again, as if the world cannot bear to be disturbed. At night, the silence is deeper still. The stars burn sharp above the prairie, the moon painting silver light across the drifts. You stand at the door, listening for something, anything, but hear only the rasp of your own breath. Even the animals sleep without sound, their bodies still, their breath faint mist in the air. It is in these moments that the silence feels endless, a presence more than an absence, something that settles into your bones and whispers that you are very small and very alone. And yet there is comfort in it too. The silence teaches patience, teaches respect. It reminds you that the land has always been here, long before your cabin, long before your tools and fire. It will remain long after. In the silence, you understand your place in the world, a guest, surviving at the mercy of winter. So you stand there, wrapped in the frozen hush, your breath clouding, your boots firm in the snow. The silence holds you, and for a moment it feels less like a threat and more like a truth. Out here the cold is endless, the silence eternal, and your life is measured not in words or noise but in the quiet hours you endure. Hunger is a sharper cold than the wind. It gnaws at you slow, steady, deeper than frostbite, creeping into your bones and making the world blur around the edges. Out here in the Wild West winter, food is not just something to fill your belly, it is survival measured out in handfuls. You open the pantry door, and the sight makes your stomach twist. Shelves lined with jars of beans and cornmeal, sacks of flour half empty, a strip or two of jerky hanging stiff as wood. It isn't much, and you know it has to last until the thaw, until wagons can move again, until trading posts open and supply lines breathe back to life. You ration every meal with the precision of a banker counting gold coins. Breakfast is never a feast. A small handful of cornmeal boiled into mush, maybe sweetened with a spoon of molasses if you have any left. Sometimes a thin biscuit, hard as bark but filling enough to keep your legs moving. Coffee, if you're lucky, though more often it's just hot water flavored with grounds used 3 times already. The smell of it gives hope, though the taste is little more than ash. At midday you chew jerky, salty tough, a labor in itself. It fills your mouth with grit, your jaw aching, but you are grateful for it. You remember the work it took to hang the strips by the fire weeks ago, the smell of smoke curling around the meat, the thought of winter pressing you to prepare. Without it, there would be nothing. Evening brings beans, maybe stretched with scraps of bacon fat, maybe with nothing at all. You boil them slow, letting the stove do its work, the smell filling the cabin long before the pot is ready. The family gathers close, bowls in hand, steam fogging the windows. It is not luxury, but it is warmth, and warmth is a kind of hope. You eat slow, making every spoonful count, telling stories to distract from the emptiness that never quite goes away. Sometimes you dream of fresh bread, of roast meat, of butter melting golden on a slice of cornbread. You wake with your mouth watering, only to find the same beans waiting, the same thin flour biscuits. The monotony wears on you, not just in the body, but in the spirit. But variety is a luxury for the city, not for the frontier winter. Out here, survival has a flavor, and it is salt, smoke, and scarcity. When storms last too long and food runs low, desperation creeps in. You stretch flour with sawdust or crushed corn husks. You water the beans until the broth is more liquid than meal. You chew on roots dug from beneath the snow, bitter but filling. Every scrap matters, every crumb guarded as though it were treasure. Yet in this hardship, there is resilience. Families gather closer, sharing what little they have. Neighbors might trade sugar for flour, jerky for salt, each bargain struck with the weight of survival behind it. And when a rare feast comes, maybe a rabbit snared or a deer taken down, the whole cabin glows with joy. For a night, the cold is forgotten, replaced with the crackle of meat on the fire and the sound of laughter echoing against the log walls. The food problem is never solved, it is endured. Each day, each meal, each ration stretched a little farther, you hold the hunger at bay. Out here in the Wild West winter, your stomach is never truly full, but your will, your grit, your stubborn fight to keep going that is fed every day in every bite, no matter how small. The snow stretches wide, swallowing the land between cabins and homesteads until neighbors feel more like ghosts than people. Out here in the Wild West winter, distance is not measured in miles, but in how much life the cold will take from you on the way. A neighbor 2 miles away might as well be on the far side of the earth once the drifts pile higher than fences. You think of them often, those other families scattered across the prairie. A flicker of smoke rising from a chimney is sometimes the only proof they still endure, still tending their fires, still fighting the same hunger and frost you are. Yet weeks can pass without a word exchanged, the silence between you heavier than the silence of snow. Traveling to see them is never simple. You hitch the horses only if you must, breaking ice from their manes, your breath steaming as you push into the storm. The wind cuts across the plains, blinding you, turning familiar paths into endless white. You tie a rope from the cabin to the barn so you can find your way back, but beyond that rope lies a wilderness waiting to swallow you. Visiting a neighbor is a gamble, and sometimes you return half frozen, clutching nothing more than a handful of salt or flour. Inside the cabin, the absence of company is a weight all its own. You long for voices beyond your family, for news, for laughter, for any reminder that you are not alone in this frozen desert. Children ask when they will see the neighbor's children again, when they will hear stories around a fire not their own. You tell them soon, though you know soon is a lie born of kindness. Letters arrive late, if at all, carried by riders braving storms that would stop lesser men. News of the world beyond the frontier feels like it comes from another life, another season. You clutch those scraps of paper tight, reading every line twice, as though the words themselves carry warmth. And yet, when neighbors do appear, when a knock rattles the cabin door and a face rhymed with frost steps inside, the joy is fierce. You share what little you have, pouring hot beans into bowls, passing bread, filling the room with talk, until the silence finally breaks. For a night, the cabin glows with more than firelight. It glows with the reminder that you are not alone. But as morning comes, they leave again, faces disappearing into the endless white, their tracks already filling with snow. The distance grows wide once more, and you return to the quiet, to the fight against cold and hunger, to the solitude that is both burden and teacher. In the Wild West winter, neighbors are few and far, but their presence when it comes is proof that the human spirit can stretch across even the widest, coldest silence. The sky turns heavy long before the storm arrives. Clouds stack like dark mountains, rolling across the horizon, swallowing the pale sun until the world feels trapped in shadow. The wind begins as a whisper, a faint moan through the trees, then grows into a roar that shakes the cabin walls. You know what's coming, a snowstorm without end. The first flakes fall lazy, drifting down like ash. Then more, thicker, faster, until the air itself becomes a wall of white. You step outside for one last armload of wood and the snow blinds you, stinging your eyes, needling your skin. The wind drives it sideways, filling every crack, piling against the door, burying your tracks before you even take another step. Back inside, you bolt the shutters tight. The storm presses against them, rattling, clawing as if it wants in. The cabin creaks under the strain, timbers groaning, the roof whining beneath the weight. You sit by the fire, listening as the world howls, the sound relentless, unending. It is not like rain, not like thunder. It is a sound that drowns thought, a sound that makes you feel very small against the vastness of nature. The snow builds quick. You can hear it thudding against the walls, sliding from the roof in heavy sheets. By morning, the door will be buried, the windows sealed tight with drifts high as a man. Sometimes the snow packs so deep you have to dig your way out, shovel in hand, carving a tunnel back into the world. And sometimes, when the storm lasts for days, you don't dig at all. You wait, trapped in your cabin, while the cold gnaws at your woodpile and your stomach. The animals suffer most. You hear the horses stamping in their lean-to, restless, frightened by the roar. You want to go to them, to soothe them, but the storm holds you hostage. The cattle huddle together, their breath freezing on their hides, snow plastering their backs until they look like statues. Every hour that passes without you reaching them feels like a debt you may not be able to repay. Inside, the air grows stale, the fire struggling against the draft. The children grow restless, their voices swallowed by the storm. You tell them stories to pass the time, their eyes wide in the flickering firelight, but even your words seem small compared to the endless howl outside. When storms like this come, you measure life by the log, by the meal, by the hour. You feed the hearth slow, careful not to waste. You ration food even tighter. And as the storm rages on, you wonder if it will ever end, if the snow will ever stop, or if this is the winter that finally buries everything. Then, one morning, silence. The storm has spent itself, leaving the world unrecognizable. The cabin door groans as you push it open, the snow waist-deep, the prairie transformed into a white ocean. The sun glitters on the drifts, cruel and bright, and for a moment you feel both relief and dread, because you know this storm is only one of many. The Wild West winter is far from finished. The little ones wake shivering, their breath hanging in the air like smoke. Even beneath quilts piled high, the cold finds its way in, creeping through cracks in the walls, slipping beneath the door. Their small hands clutch at the blankets, noses red, lips pale. You do what you can, but in a cabin where the fire fades at night, the children always feel the cold first. You wrap them tighter in quilts stitched by hand, patches on patches, each one a shield against the winter. You pull socks over their feet, sometimes 2 pairs, sometimes mittens borrowed from your own hands just so theirs can stay warm. The stove glows faintly, its embers weak, and you move quickly to feed it, coaxing the flame back to life. The children watch, silent, their eyes wide as the room slowly warms. Breakfast comes thin but hot, a bowl of mush or beans, steam rising in the frosty air. The children clutch their bowls as though holding onto the sun itself, their small fingers thawing against the tin. They sip slow, blowing across the surface, the warmth painting their cheeks pink again. For a while their laughter returns, their voices filling the cabin and pushing back the silence that winter presses so heavily upon you. But keeping them warm is a battle without end. Their boots are too thin, worn from last year, the leather cracked despite your best efforts to mend them. You stuff rags inside to keep the frost from biting, tie scarves twice around their faces, send them out only when there is no choice. They trudge through the snow, their legs sinking, their breath ragged, yet their spirit holds. Children learn quickly on the frontier, the cold shows no mercy, even to the young. At night, when the wind howls and the shutters rattle, the children huddle together for warmth. You tell them stories by firelight, not just to pass the time, but to keep their minds from fear. Tales of warmer days, of green fields and summer rivers, of spring calves and apple blossoms. Their eyes grow heavy as you speak, their heads resting against one another, the firelight painting their faces soft and golden. Still, you worry. A cough that lingers, cheeks too pale, fingers too stiff after a short walk outside. Illness thrives in the cold, and every winter fever feels like a shadow waiting at the door. You brew teas from dried herbs, dose with honey when you have it, pray that rest and warmth will be enough. The children's chill is not just their own, it becomes yours. Every shiver they feel runs through you, every cough echoes in your chest. You guard them with fire, with blankets, with stories, with every scrap of food you can spare. And though the winter presses hard, you remind yourself of one thing. If the children endure, so does the future. In the Wild West winter, the cold tries to claim them first. But night after night, as you tuck them close and listen to their breathing soften into sleep, you know you have stolen another day back from the frost. The animals are your wealth, your labor, and your food, yet in winter they are as vulnerable as you are. The cold shows them no mercy. Every morning you hear it in their cries, the restless stamping of hooves, the low, mournful calls of cattle searching for grass buried under feet of snow. Their breath clouds the air in great plumes, frosting their hides until they look ghostly in the pale dawn. You trudge through drifts to reach them, each step heavy, your boots sinking deep. The barn or lean-to offers some shelter, but it is never enough. Snow forces its way inside through every gap, turning bedding stiff and damp. You pitch hay from the loft, the dry stalks falling in golden heaps, but the animals tear into it too quickly, their hunger bottomless. You ration carefully, every bale must last the season, yet each mouth demands more than you can spare. Water is the cruelest battle. The troughs freeze solid each night, ice thick as a window pane, sealing away the lifeline beneath. You swing the back of an axe again and again, your arms aching, until shards fly and the dark water finally shows through. Horses push their muzzles into the hole, gulping greedily, their whiskers crusting with frost. The cattle crowd close, their tongues lapping loudly, the sound desperate but relieved. You know by tomorrow it will be frozen again, and the fight will repeat. Some days the cold wins. A calf lies still in the snow, its body stiff, its life stolen in the hours before dawn. You drag it aside, heart heavy, knowing there was nothing more you could do. A chicken freezes on the roost, its feathers rimed white. Even strong animals fall to horses with ice clinging to their manes, cows with ribs sharp against their hides. Each loss cuts deep, not just in spirit but in survival. Every beast is food, milk, labor, or trade. Predators lurk too, sensing weakness. Coyotes slink at the edges of the herd, their eyes glowing in the moonlight, bold when storms cover their approach. Wolves howl from the ridges, their voices carrying far in the night, a reminder that hunger drives them as sharply as it drives you. You keep a rifle near, ready to fire into the dark, to scare them back. But you know they will return, patient, waiting for the cold to do their work. Still, there are victories. A mare delivers a foal despite the frost, its tiny body steaming as you wrap it in blankets by the stove. A cow survives a storm that should have claimed her, stubbornly standing when the drifts settle. These moments remind you that animals too have a will to endure, a spirit as tough as the land itself. You run your hands over their coarse hides, feeling the tremble of life beneath. They depend on you, but you depend on them too. Together you fight the same enemy, the endless winter. In every bale of hay thrown, every trough cracked open, every rifle shot into the night, you protect them because they are part of your survival, as much as the fire, as much as the food. In the Wild West winter, animals live or die beside you, and each one that endures is proof that not all life surrenders to the cold. It begins with a shiver in the air, a restless stirring that runs through the trees. The wind shifts, carrying with it the faintest whistle, almost too soft to notice. But soon that whisper grows, rising to a moan, and then to a howl so fierce it shakes the cabin walls. You know what it means. The blizzard is here. Snow comes first in thin sheets, blowing sideways, scratching at your face like claws. Then it thickens, a furious wall of white, blotting out the world until even the nearest fence post disappears. The roar builds, steady and unrelenting, a sound that fills your ears and rattles your bones. It is not like thunder, sudden and passing. It is endless, like the earth itself has decided to scream. Inside, the fire glows but feels small against the storm pressing on every side. The shutters slam, the roof groans, snow sifts through cracks in the logs. You stuff rags into gaps, pile blankets along the floorboards, anything to hold the cold at bay. Still, the wind finds you, pushing through with icy fingers that crawl over your skin. The children huddle closer, eyes wide at the sound of the blizzard's fury. The animals outside bear it too. Horses stamp in their stalls, restless, the smell of fear rising with their breath. Cattle press against one another, snow plastering their backs until they are more white than brown. You think of them constantly, praying the shelter holds, praying the hay you laid down is enough. But the storm is merciless, and you cannot reach them until it passes. The distance between cabin and barn may as well be 100 miles. Hours stretch into days. The firewood pile shrinks as the blizzard devours the world outside. Each time you open the door, snow blasts in, stinging your face, filling the room with drifts before you can shut it again. The path you dug yesterday is gone, swallowed whole. The cabin feels like a ship trapped in a frozen sea, adrift with no horizon, no escape. At night, the roar is worst. It howls through the dark like a living thing, a voice that never tires. Sleep comes in fits, broken by the crash of branches, the sudden thud of snow sliding from the roof. You lie awake, listening, waiting, wondering if the cabin walls will hold against the storm's endless assault. And then, silence. Sudden, complete. You open the door at dawn and step into a world remade. Snowdrifts climb higher than the windows, fences vanish, landmarks erased. The prairie lies buried, smooth and endless, glittering under the pale Sunday. The blizzard has passed, but its mark is everywhere, trees broken, animals gaunt, woodpile low. The roar lingers in your ears, even as the silence settles back. You know it will come again. Out here in the Wild West, blizzards are not a single battle but a season-long war, and every roar is a reminder of how small you are against the endless winter. The sun sinks early, swallowed by a horizon already heavy with snow. Twilight lingers only for a breath, then the world falls into darkness. Night stretches long, longer than your patience, longer than your firewood pile can comfortably endure. In the heart of winter, the dark feels like a second storm, silent, endless, and just as dangerous. You light the oil lamp, its weak flame painting the cabin in amber glow. Shadows dance across the log walls, the light swallowed quickly by corners. The stove hums, the fire crackling, but it is never enough. Cold presses from every side, seeping in through the walls, creeping across the floor, settling in your bones. You sit close to the hearth, hands stretched toward it, eyes heavy but mind restless. The children fall asleep first, bundled together under quilts, their breath rising in faint clouds even indoors. Their small faces flicker in the lamplight, their lashes rimmed with frost where the cold has kissed them. You listen to their steady breathing and feel both comfort and worry. The night is long, too long, and illness often comes in these hours, when the body grows weak and the fire burns low. Time moves differently in the long night. Minutes drag into hours, the lamp sputters, the woodpile shrinks, and each trip outside for more logs feels like stepping into another world. The door groans open, wind and snow rushing in, biting your face before you can close it again. You carry the wood back fast, your hands stiff, your nose burning, grateful each time you return to the glow of the stove. Sleep tempts you, but you fight it. A fire left untended will die before dawn, and the cold will slip into the cabin like a thief. So you doze in the chair instead, waking often to feed the stove, listening to the logs pop and crack as though they are speaking to you, reminding you to stay awake, to endure. Outside, the land lies in silence, broken only by the groan of trees under their icy weight or the distant cry of a wolf. The stars burn sharp, brittle points of light against the vast dark. You think of neighbors, miles away, staring into their own fires, fighting their own long nights. The thought both comforts you and deepens the loneliness. Toward morning, the oil lamp dies, its flame guttering out, leaving you with only the fire's glow. The children stir, pulling quilts tighter, their faces pale in the dim light. You feed the stove one last log, lean back, and wait for the faintest hint of dawn to creep into the sky. When it comes, pale and slow, it feels like a victory. Another long night endured, another battle won against the cold and dark. And though you know the next night will stretch just as far, just as heavy, you allow yourself a moment of quiet relief. Because here, in the Wild West winter, survival is nothing more than a chain of nights endured, one after another, until the thaw finally comes. You rise in the half-light of another freezing morning, and before you even touch the door latch, you reach for your clothes. Out here in the Wild West winter, clothes are not fashion, not comfort, they are armor. Without them, the cold would take you within minutes, stripping the life from your skin, creeping into your lungs, and hardening your blood. Dressing each day feels less like a routine and more like preparing for battle. The first layer is always wool, a coarse shirt, scratchy against your skin, but warm in a way no linen or cotton could ever be. Wool holds heat even when damp, and that small blessing might mean the difference between shivering and freezing. Over it goes another shirt, patched at the elbows, threadbare but serviceable. Then come the trousers, thick, stiff from yesterday's frost, heavy against your legs as you pull them on. Every piece feels like a shield, each layer a thin wall between you and death. You wrap your feet carefully, knowing they will carry the heaviest burden. Wool socks first, then another pair if you have them, sometimes with scraps of cloth stuffed inside to fill the holes worn thin from miles of use. The boots are cracked, the leather stiff, but you rub them with grease when you can, praying it will keep out the wet. Step into snow without care, and you'll feel the frostbite nipping before you've gone 10 paces. Your toes are always at risk, always whispering their fragile mortality. Gloves are never thick enough. You stitch them again and again, patches on patches, fingers stiff where the seams rub. When they tear beyond repair, you improvise, wrapping your hands in rags, in old scraps of hide, anything that can keep the sting of wind from biting into your skin. Sometimes you must pull the gloves off to work, to hold an axe or tie a knot, and that's when the danger comes fast. The cold burns in seconds, leaving your skin pale and numb. You blow into your fists, press them close to the fire, and thank whatever mercy you can that you caught it before the frost stole more. Around your neck, a scarf, long and heavy, wrapped twice and tucked into your coat. It guards your throat, your chest, the place where cold loves to seep in deepest. You pull it high across your face, leaving only your eyes exposed, and even those soon sting, lashes frosting over with each breath. The coat is your final shield. Thick wool or buffalo hide if you're fortunate, patched canvas or fur if you're not. Its weight is comforting, a steady pressure on your shoulders, but even the best coat cannot stop the wind forever. You pull it close, tie it with a rope or a belt, anything to keep the air from crawling underneath. When the storm hits, you hunch inside it like a turtle in its shell, praying the seams hold. Every morning, you dress this way, layering on survival piece by piece. Every evening, you peel the clothes off slowly, stiff and heavy with ice, laying them by the fire to thaw. There is no luxury here, no fine cloth or silken lining, only wool, fur, leather, and grit. Clothes are not meant to make you look strong, they are meant to keep you alive. And as the wind howls outside, clawing at the cabin, you run your hand over the coat hanging by the door, the boots by the hearth, the gloves patched until they barely resemble their first form. They are not just clothes, they are the thin skin of life itself, the last defense between your body and the death waiting in the snow. The cold is not just an enemy outside your door, it is a hunter, patient and cunning, always waiting for the moment you falter. You learn to fear it not only for its bite on the air, but for the marks it leaves on your body, fingers stiffening, toes numbing, skin paling into ghostly white. Out here in the Wild West winter, frostbite is a word spoken like a curse, one that carries the weight of pain, loss, and death. It begins subtly. You step outside to fetch wood or to check the cattle, and the cold seems manageable at first. Your breath steams, your cheeks sting, but nothing more. You swing the axe, push through drifts, focus on the work. Time slips by unnoticed. Then you feel it, a tingling in your fingertips, a numbness creeping into your toes. At first, you brush it off, believing the fire will fix it when you return. But frostbite is silent, merciless, and it doesn't wait for you to be ready. By the time you notice, your hands are stiff, your grip clumsy. You try to curl your fingers, but they don't obey. Your boots feel heavy, your feet hollow, as though they no longer belong to you. You peel off a glove and the sight turns your stomach skin pale as wax, patches already hard to the touch. That's the warning. If you ignore it, the color will darken to gray, then black. Flesh will die, and there will be no mending it. Fear comes fast then. You stumble back toward the cabin, every step a prayer. Inside, you thrust your hands toward the fire, desperate for heat. The pain arrives in waves, searing as blood creeps back into frozen veins. You grit your teeth against the sting, tears cutting paths through the frost on your face. It feels like knives, but it is better than nothing. Pain means life is still there, clinging. Numbness is the true danger when the body gives up, when you no longer feel at all. Some are not so lucky. Neighbors lose fingers, ears, even whole feet to the cold. You hear stories whispered of men who froze in the saddle, their hands locked around reins, their eyes glassed over by ice. Of children who lingered too long outside, their cheeks burned deep, scars left for life. Of trappers who returned to camp limping, their boots hiding feet already dead beneath the skin. In the Wild West winter, frostbite is a thief that steals piece by piece. You learn tricks to fight it. Keep moving, keep blood flowing. Wrap rags inside your boots, tuck hands under arms when gloves fail. Share warmth with others, huddled close, body heat guarding what fire cannot reach. Yet even with every precaution, the fear never fades. Every time you step into the snow, the thought lingers. Will I come back with all I carried out? The fire crackles, the cabin walls hold, but outside, the cold waits. Frostbite is its whisper, its mark, the proof it has touched you and nearly won. And though you survive, though the color returns to your hands, you know tomorrow it will hunt again, relentless, unyielding. In the Wild West winter, the cold does not forgive. It remembers, and it never stops trying to take more. There comes a point in every winter when the supplies run too low, when the flour sack grows light, the salt jar scrapes empty, and the kerosene lamp sputters more often than it glows. No matter how well you prepared, the cold always lasts longer, bites harder, takes more. And so you face a choice no one welcomes. You must trade. That means leaving the fragile safety of your cabin and venturing into the endless white. You hitch the horses with fingers stiff from the cold, breath rising in heavy clouds as you fasten leather brittle from frost. They stamp and snort, uneasy, their ears twitching at the bite of the air. You load the sled or wagon with what little you have, to barter dried hides, perhaps a pail of lard, maybe a bundle of firewood cut straighter than most. Every item feels costly, carved from your labor, but out here you trade sweat for salt, toil for flour, survival for survival. The journey begins in silence. The snow crunches under the runners, the wind pressing against your coat, the horizon lost to a haze of white. The path you once knew by heart is buried, landmarks erased by drifts taller than fences. You trust memory and instinct, reading the faint rise of the land, the way trees bend under weight, the hollow sound where a creek hides beneath ice. A single wrong turn could swallow you whole, leave you circling until the cold claims you. The world feels abandoned. No birds stir, no cattle graze, no human voice carries across the frozen air. The only sound is the steady rhythm of hooves and the groan of wood against ice. Every mile stretches longer than the last, every breath drawn with effort. Fear rides with you, silent and close, fear of the storm rising sudden, fear of thin ice beneath the snow, fear of never finding your way back. At last, the trading post appears like a mirage, smoke rising from its chimney, the faint outline of walls standing stubborn against the cold. Relief floods you, heavy as the fatigue in your legs. Inside, the warmth feels like another world. The air is thick with the smell of hides, tobacco, coffee boiled strong. Men huddle close to the stove, faces gaunt but eyes alive, each of them carrying the same story of struggle. You spread your goods on the counter. The trader weighs them with practiced eyes, his hands quick, his ledger smudged with ash. Every exchange feels measured not just in weight but in survival. Your hides for his flour, your wood for his salt, your hours of labor for his kerosene. There is no bargaining with the cold outside. You accept what you can, because something is always better than nothing. When you leave, the sled feels heavier, but so does your heart. The road back waits, and with it the storm, the silence, the frostbite creeping at the edges of your gloves. Yet there is strength too in knowing you carry flour for bread, salt for meat, kerosene for light. Every trade is a gamble with the winter, but without it, the fight would already be lost. As the horses pull you homeward through the drifts, the sky dimming toward night, you clutch the reins tight and breathe slow. Out here in the Wild West, trading in the snow is more than commerce. It is a pact with the cold, a promise that no matter how harsh the storm, you will endure it and return to fight again tomorrow. Snow erases everything. Fences vanish, wagon ruts disappear, and trails once worn deep by hoof and wheel lie hidden under a smooth, unbroken surface. Out here in the Wild West winter, the world becomes a blank page each morning, and finding your way across it can mean the difference between life and death. That is why you learn to read tracks, the faint signs pressed into snow that tell you where to step, when to turn, and sometimes what dangers linger near. Your own tracks are often the first you see. The narrow trail between cabin and barn, the grooves of your boots leading out and back again, each one familiar. But even those are never certain. A single night of drifting wind can swallow them whole, leaving you staring at a white plain where your path once was. More than once, you've tied a rope from door to barn, your lifeline in storms that erase everything else. Without it, the distance of 30 steps might stretch into an eternity you'll never return from. Animal tracks scatter across the snow like stories written in a secret language. Deer leave heart-shaped prints, delicate and light, often leading to stands of brush where they paw at frozen earth for food. Rabbits stamp quick, tight trails, their leaps marked by the drag of fur. Sometimes you see the wide pads of a coyote or the heavier prints of a wolf, each one making the hair on your neck rise. These signs remind you that you are not alone in this frozen world that hunger drives more than men across the prairie. You follow tracks not only to hunt but to survive the land itself. A wagon trail half buried in drifts can guide you toward town, its ruts frozen into faint depressions. Hoof prints pressed deep might lead to a neighbor's homestead, a reminder that others endure the same struggle. Even a line of fence posts, their tops poking just above the snow, can mark the way through an otherwise featureless waste. You train your eyes to notice what others might miss: the shadow of a drift, the darker hue where snow hides a rut, the faint ridge of packed ice left by travel weeks before. But tracks can betray you. Snow lies, shifting with every gust, twisting paths until they lead nowhere. You might follow a trail for miles only to find it loop back on itself, the wind having filled and erased portions until you are lost. Sometimes tracks vanish suddenly, swallowed by a snowdrift, leaving you stranded without a guide. The fear in those moments is sharp, the realization that the world has taken your bearings, leaving you adrift in silence. Still, tracks are hope. They are proof of life moving through the same struggle you face. They remind you that paths exist, even when hidden, that others have walked this way before. You kneel to study them, your fingers brushing the imprint, the snow cold but real beneath your touch. You memorize the direction, the depth, the story told by each mark. Then you rise, set your boots carefully into the prints, and move forward. Each step you take in another's track saves you strength, keeps you steady, gives you purpose. In the Wild West winter, tracks in the white are more than footprints, they are lifelines, fragile signs that carve order from chaos, survival from a land determined to erase everything in its grasp. The storm has locked you inside again, the windows are sealed with snow, the door blocked by drifts, and the wind howls without pause. Days blur into nights, and the fire becomes the only rhythm of time, logs fed, flames rising, embers sinking. Beyond that, nothing changes. The same walls, the same chairs, the same voices echoing off timber until they feel like ghosts. This is how cabin fever begins. At first, it is only restlessness. You pace from wall to wall, hands brushing the rough logs as if testing their strength. You sit, then rise again, unable to settle. The silence presses too heavy, the sameness too sharp. The children squabble over scraps of play, their laughter edged with impatience. Even simple chores grow unbearable: mending clothes, fetching wood, stirring beans in the pot. Every task feels too small to contain the weight of the days. The air inside thickens with breath and smoke, stale and close. You open the door once, just for air, but the storm's roar drives you back, the blast of snow cutting your face raw. You shut it again, and the cabin seems smaller than before, its corners pressing inward, shrinking with each hour. Your eyes wander constantly to the frost-crusted window, staring at the blur of white beyond, longing for movement, for sound, for proof the world still exists. Conversations repeat. Stories told a dozen times are told again, though no one truly listens. The same questions echo: how long will the storm last? How much food remains? How much wood is left? You answer them, though you know there are no answers. Each word feels heavier than the last, weighted with the dread of truth no one wants spoken. Nights are the hardest. The fire burns low. The oil lamp dims, and the shadows creep higher on the walls. Sleep comes slow, restless, filled with dreams of open fields, of green grass, of summer winds. You wake with your chest tight, only to find the same walls waiting, the same storm whispering outside. The darkness feeds the mind too much space to wander. You imagine the walls closing in, the silence breaking into whispers, the fire's crackle turning into voices not your own. You shake your head, remind yourself it is only the storm, only the cold, but the fear lingers all the same. Yet even in the grip of cabin fever, survival demands patience. You gather the family for hymns, for stories, for small rituals that keep the hours from splintering. You carve scraps of wood into toys, sew patches into blankets, anything to give the mind a tether. You watch the children play by firelight, their eyes bright despite the storm, and you cling to their resilience as though it is your own. When at last the storm eases and the door groans open, the first breath of fresh air feels like freedom. The snow is deep, the land unrecognizable, but it doesn't matter. The cabin has released you, and your steps into the white feel lighter than they should. Cabin fever has passed for now. But you know it will return, as sure as the next storm, waiting in the stillness to test you again. In the Wild West winter, the cold takes many forms. Sometimes it is frostbite, sometimes hunger, but sometimes it is the silence itself, the weight of four walls, the long stretch of days that gnaws not at the body but at the mind. When the cold sinks too deep, when the skin burns with frost or the chest rattles with cough, you cannot walk to a doctor. There is no apothecary waiting down the street, no kindly hand to offer medicine in glass bottles. Out here on the Wild West frontier, you make do with what you have, and that means remedies pulled from cupboards, from root cellars, from memory. Each cure is as fragile as the body it tends, yet sometimes it is enough to keep death at bay. Whiskey is the first remedy for almost everything. You pour it into tin cups, the liquid burning down throats, warming bellies against the frozen air. For toothaches, a rag soaked in whiskey pressed against the gums numbs the pain. For fevers, a swallow knocks a man into restless sleep. And when the cold feels too sharp in the lungs, whiskey is swallowed like fire, a hope that the heat inside will drive the frost out. It is no true cure, but it gives strength when strength is fading. Herbs dried and bundled in the summer become treasures in winter. Sage brewed into tea to soothe sore throats. Peppermint leaves steeped for coughs, their steam rising in sharp, clean clouds. Chamomile for restless children, calming their minds when cabin fever gnaws too sharp. Even willow bark, stripped and boiled, is chewed for pain, the bitter taste a reminder that medicine is rarely sweet. Each cupful feels like a blessing, a thread tying you back to the warmth of summer fields. Honey, if you have it, is guarded like gold. A spoonful stirred into hot tea coats throats raw from cold air, softening the rasp of breath. Spread thin on bread, it feeds not just the body but the spirit, its sweetness, a promise that not all things in life are bitter. When coughs linger, honey mixed with herbs becomes a draught. You press upon the sick, praying it will ease their suffering. For frostbite, remedies are rougher still. You rub snow against pale skin at first, shocking warmth back into flesh, then wrap hands or feet in rags warmed by the fire. Some swear by goose fat, smeared thick to trap what heat remains, others by onion poultices pressed to the skin. Each method is desperate, a fight against the creeping black that marks flesh already claimed by the cold. Sometimes you win, sometimes you don't. For fevers, you strip wet cloths and press them to the brow. You mix vinegar with water, wiping skin clammy and pale. You brew strong broths from bones, feeding the sick one spoon at a time, urging them to drink, to swallow, to stay with you. You keep the fire high, then let it fall low, never sure which is the right way, praying the body finds its balance before it slips away. These remedies are born of necessity, passed down in whispers, tested by desperation. They are not certain, not guaranteed. Yet in the Wild West winter, certainty is a luxury you cannot afford. A cup of tea, a spoon of honey, a rag soaked in whiskey. Sometimes these small acts hold a life steady through the storm. And when the sick recover, when the cough fades or the frostbite heals, you give thanks not just for the remedies, but for the will that carried them through. Because out here, survival is stitched together from faith, stubbornness, and whatever you can pull from the land or the cupboard. Homemade remedies may be fragile, but in the hands of the desperate, they are as strong as hope itself. In summer, letters arrive with the rhythm of hoofbeats, wagons rolling steady across the prairie, riders bringing word from far-off towns. But in the Wild West winter, that rhythm falters. Snow swallows trails, storms bury roads, rivers freeze thick, and the world beyond your cabin grows silent. The mail is delayed, sometimes for weeks, sometimes for months, and you live cut off, waiting for news that may never come. At first, you count the days. You know when the rider should pass, the usual time when hoofprints would appear by the trail, or when neighbors would gather, expectant, at the small outpost where letters were stacked in neat piles. You listen for it, straining against the howl of the wind, hoping to catch the faint sound of hooves breaking snow. But the days pass quiet, the horizon empty, and hope dulls into silence. Inside the cabin, the absence of news weighs heavy. You sit by the fire, staring at the frost-laced window, wondering if the world beyond still stirs as it once did. Did the crops fail back east? Did sickness take hold in towns along the rail? Has the war ended, or begun, or shifted in ways you cannot know? Without letters, you live in ignorance, and ignorance feels like a second winter pressing in, colder than the first. The children ask about cousins they have not seen, about grandparents who write of birthdays and Christmases. You nod, tell them letters will come soon, though you know the truth. The storm doesn't care for family ties, the snow doesn't honor longing. Every word you wait for sits trapped in some rider's satchel, frozen miles away, or lost entirely, buried beneath drifts no one will dig through until spring. When mail does arrive, it comes like treasure. A rider pushes through at last, his coat stiff with ice, his horse gaunt from the fight. He carries a bundle of letters, worn, edges curled from damp, ink, sometimes smudged but still legible. Neighbors gather quick, faces eager, hands trembling as names are called. Each letter is held like gold, opened with reverence, eyes devouring the words as though they are food. Laughter spills from some cabins, tears from others, but always there is relief. The silence is broken, the outside world remembered. Sometimes, though, letters bring sorrow. News of death delayed weeks, even months, until grief feels strange, old yet fresh at the same time. You clutch the paper, reading the lines again and again, wishing you could have been there, wishing you could have sent words back before it was too late. The delay makes everything heavier, every joy dimmed, every sorrow sharpened. Between arrivals, you write letters of your own. By lamplight, you press pen to paper, words cramped and uneven in the cold. You tell of storms, of firewood, of cattle barely surviving, of children growing taller, though they are still pale from lack of Sunday. You write because it keeps you tethered, because even if the letter never arrives, the act itself defies the silence. The delayed mail is more than a nuisance. It is a reminder. Out here, you are far and you are small. The land is wide, the cold unyielding, and the world beyond moves whether you know it or not. Yet every letter that does arrive proves something too, that even across the frozen miles, across rivers locked in ice and trails erased by snow, words can still find their way. And when they do, they carry warmth enough to last through many storms. When the snow buries the land and the rivers freeze solid, survival demands more than strength, it demands wit. Out here in the Wild West winter, you learn quickly that brute force alone cannot outlast the cold. Ingenuity becomes as important as firewood, and ice itself, though merciless, becomes a tool if you are clever enough to use it. Food storage is the first trial. With no cellar deep enough and no larder sealed tight enough, the cold does your work for you. You pack meat into barrels of snow, covering it with layers of ice that lock it safe from rot. Deer, rabbit, or the rare cow, slaughtered before it starves. Each cut is preserved in nature's own freezer. The prairie may try to kill you, but it also hands you the means to keep life a little longer. Sometimes you carve blocks of ice straight from the creek, stacking them into walls that become makeshift storage huts. The blocks fit snug, gleaming blue in the dim light, the gaps packed with snow until they hold like mortar. Inside, temperatures stay steady, colder than any summer root cellar, perfect for butter, milk, or precious jars of preserves. You call it work, but in truth it is a kind of art, the art of bending winter's cruelty into your own advantage. Water, too, demands ingenuity. Melting snow is wasteful, shrinking a panful to nothing more than a swallow. So you collect ice instead, thick slabs hacked from the frozen creek, carried back heavy in the sled, stored against the wall to melt slow by the fire. Each block yields gallons, more than snow ever could. You learn to cut it clean, to wedge it with axes and crowbars, to pull it free without letting it shatter. Ice, once broken, becomes life in a bucket. Cold itself can serve you if you are wise. You hang food in snowbanks, bury barrels deep in drifts, even use frozen ground as a kind of oven in reverse, keeping what you must preserve as hard as stone until the thaw. You rig lines across the cabin rafters, hanging strips of meat where both smoke and frost cure them firm. Even milk, left outside in tin pails, freezes into solid blocks you chip away at through the weeks. Nothing is wasted if you can find a way to trap it in ice. But ingenuity goes beyond food. Frozen mud becomes mortar for chinks in the cabin walls, sealing drafts where rags fail. Snow itself, shoveled high against the cabin, acts as insulation, a frozen blanket that shields you from wind. Icicles dripping from the roof are broken and boiled for water, their sharp edges a reminder that even beauty has use when the cold is trying to kill you. Each trick feels small, but together they stitch survival from scarcity. You become part inventor, part scavenger, part gambler, always testing what works, what holds, what might keep the cold one step away. Others may call it desperation, but you know the truth. It is ingenuity. And when the thaw finally comes, when the rivers run again and the grass shows through, you look at the empty snowbanks, the melted ice huts, the barrels scraped clean, and you understand something. The Wild West winter never gave you mercy, it gave you problems. But with enough grit and cleverness, you turned those problems into tools, and that is why you are still standing. The cold starves everything. When the prairie is buried deep in snow and the rivers run silent beneath ice, hunger sharpens claws and teeth. You are not alone in your fight for survival. Wolves, coyotes, and even half-wild dogs stalk the edges of your homestead, shadows slipping between drifts, eyes glinting in the moonlight. Out here in the Wild West winter, predators are never far, and they are drawn by the same need that drives you, the desperate search for food. It begins with tracks in the snow. You find them near the cattle yard, wide pads pressed deep, the stride long and purposeful. Sometimes they circle, looping close, then vanishing into the trees. Other times, they lead straight to your fence, paws scraping where they tested the posts. Coyotes leave smaller marks, tighter trails, quick and restless. Wolves, though, leave no doubt heavy prints, deep, each one a weight that makes your chest tighten. At night, their voices carry. A lone howl echoes first, long and low, answered by others until the air quivers with sound. It is mournful, yet hungry, a reminder that they wait just beyond the firelight. You lie awake in your bed, listening to their chorus, the hair rising on your neck. The cattle stir uneasily, hooves stamping, tails swishing, their bodies pressing close together for protection. The horses snort and pace, ears flicking toward the sound. Even the dogs, brave as they are, whimper low, knowing the danger that prowls in the dark. You keep the rifle near the door, ready for a shot fired into the night. More often than not, the crack is enough to scatter them, shadows vanishing into trees, But sometimes hunger makes them bold. You wake to find a calf gone, its tracks ending in blood splattered across snow. Chickens disappear from the roost, feathers scattered like leaves in the wind. Each loss stings, not just because of the work and food taken, but because you know it will happen again. Once predators taste the ease of livestock, they return, relentless. Coyotes are clever thieves, darting in quick, snatching what they can, vanishing before you're even at the door. Wolves are different. They linger. They test your defenses, watching from the tree line, waiting for weakness. Sometimes you glimpse their eyes at dusk, 2 lanterns glowing in the distance, unblinking. You shout, you fire, but they remain patient, knowing winter is long and hunger will wear you down before it wears them. You build barriers where you can, logs stacked high, brush piled thick, lanterns hung to throw back the dark. You walk the fence line, checking for breaks, shoveling drifts away so the posts stand clear. At night, you feed the fire high, the glow a warning to whatever lurks beyond. But you know, these are only small defenses. The real fight is vigilance. And yet, there is a kind of respect too. Predators suffer the same as you. Their ribs show beneath their coats, their breath clouds heavy in the cold, their tracks wander farther each day. They are not evil, only desperate, and winter makes desperation in everything that breathes. Still, respect does not mean trust. You guard your stock, your family, your life, because survival is not shared, it is fought for. In the Wild West winter, predators at the edge remind you of a simple truth. The cold is not the only enemy. Hunger wears many faces, some howling in the night, some leaving prints in the snow. And while you may pity their struggle, you never forget your own comes first. Snow falls soft at first, a gentle blanket that seems harmless, even beautiful. But with each storm, each restless wind, it piles higher, shaping itself into waves of white that move across the prairie like a frozen sea. These are the drifts, and they are as dangerous as any storm. They swallow fences, bury wagons, and erase landmarks, leaving you stranded in a world that looks the same in every direction. You step outside after a long night of snow, and the path to the barn is gone. Where there once was a trail of packed earth lies a wall of white, higher than your waist. The wind has sculpted it sharp and smooth, a crest of snow that looks solid until you try to climb it. Then you sink, boots disappearing, legs swallowed, the weight dragging you down as if the snow itself wants to hold you captive. Drifts build where the wind decides, never where you expect. They heap against the cabin door, forcing you to dig your way out each morning just to see the sky. They pile high along fences until the tops vanish, leaving cattle wandering free, no barrier left to guide them. They stretch across roads, hiding ruts and gullies beneath, turning a simple journey into a trap. More than one rider has urged his horse into what looked like a flat stretch of ground, only to vanish into a drift so deep it smothered both man and beast. The worst are those that move in storms. Snow whirls so thick you cannot see your hand in front of your face, and all around, drifts grow and shift like living things. A rope tied from door to barn is your only guide, your lifeline through the white void. Without it, you could lose yourself within a few steps, circling blindly until the cold claims you. Stories spread of men found in spring, bodies curled only yards from their own cabins, lost to the drifts that swallowed their way home. Inside, you feel their weight too. Snow presses hard against the cabin walls, the windows sealed shut, the door blocked until you shove it open with your shoulder. The pressure groans in the timbers, making you wonder if the roof will hold. Each shovel of snow you heave aside is a battle, your arms aching, your breath ragged, but you keep digging. To surrender would be to let the drifts bury not just your door but your life. And yet, drifts also protect. Piled high against the cabin walls, they insulate against the wind, sealing cracks, trapping heat. In that way, the enemy becomes a reluctant ally, the snow that threatens to smother, also shielding you from the bitter air. You learn to live with both truths, the drift as killer, the drift as blanket. By spring, the drifts melt into torrents, flooding the land, carving new paths where none existed before. But while they last, they are a constant reminder that the winter shapes the world as it pleases. Out here in the Wild West, the drifts are more than snow. They are a force, shifting, deadly, patient, waiting for the careless step or the weary traveler. And when they take, they give nothing back until the thaw. In summer, rivers are the lifeblood of the prairie, winding silver threads through the land, feeding cattle, turning mills, carrying wagons and rafts across long distances. But in winter, those same rivers transform into traps. Ice claims them, spreading from shore to shore until the water vanishes beneath a frozen skin. At first glance, the sight is beautiful, smooth, glittering, steady, but beneath that calm surface lies danger as deep as the current itself. You approach the river cautiously, breath rising in white clouds, boots crunching in the snow. The surface looks solid, glazed with frost, smooth enough to tempt you across. The temptation is strong. What would take hours to go around in summer is now a straight path, a shortcut carved by winter. You tap the ice with your boot, hear the dull thud echo through it, and step forward. But every step carries a question. How thick is it? How strong? How close is the death waiting just below? Sometimes the ice holds. Horses trot across, their hooves striking sparks of sound, sleds sliding smooth, the journey swift and easy. You marvel at it, this frozen bridge gifted by the season, the way it transforms the land itself. But you never forget the stories of travelers who trusted too much, who rode into the middle and heard the crack. That sound lives in your mind, sharp as a rifle shot. It is the sound of certainty breaking. The river does not forgive. One moment you are standing on ice, the next you are plunging into black water, the cold seizing you like a fist. Your breath rips from your lungs, your limbs seize, the current pulls you down. If you are lucky, someone throws a rope, or you find the hole again before the ice slides shut above. If not, the river keeps you, and only spring will give you back. Because of that, you learn tricks. You watch the color of the ice. White and clouded means safer, black and clear means thin. You carry poles, testing each step before you trust it. You spread weight, crawling when the sound of cracks whispers under your boots, and when the risk is too great, you turn back, adding miles to your journey rather than gambling with the current's hunger. Out here, pride has buried too many already, yet frozen rivers serve too. You chip blocks of ice from their surface, dragging them back to the cabin to melt for water. You fish through holes cut with axes, lowering lines into the dark still flowing beneath. Sometimes a trout or perch is pulled up thrashing, its silver body flashing against the white, a rare meal pulled straight from under winter's frozen grip. But no matter how you use it, the river remains a thing to fear. Even when you cross safely, even when the sled glides smooth from one bank to the other, you feel your heart hammering, your breath caught tight, as though the river still waits for you to falter, and you know that it does. In the Wild West winter, frozen rivers are never truly bridges, never truly safe. They are bargains struck with nature. Cross if you must, but remember the cost. For beneath every smooth white path lies water restless, waiting, ready to remind you that the ice is never stronger than the river that runs below. Winter has a way of convincing you it will never end. Day after day, the sky stays heavy, the air sharp, the snow deep. But then, slowly, quietly, something shifts. The sun lingers a little longer on the horizon, its pale light stretching minutes into hours. The change is small, but out here in the Wild West, it feels like a promise, the return of the Sunday. You notice it first in the mornings. Where once the cabin was still cloaked in darkness long after chores began, now light seeps through the frost-laced window earlier, painting the walls in a faint golden glow. You pause at the stove, poker in hand, watching that light spill across the floor, warmer than any fire. It isn't strong enough to chase away the cold, not yet, but it stirs something inside you, hope. The animals sense it too. Horses that stood stiff in the lean-to now toss their heads, their breath still steaming, but their eyes livelier. Cattle low, louder, restless, pawing at the snow as if they can already smell the grass beneath. Even the dogs perk up, barking at shadows, tails wagging as though they know the worst is loosening its grip. The long silence of winter begins to crack, replaced by small sounds of life stirring again. Outside, the snow still lies deep, but its surface changes. Ice softens underfoot, crust giving way to slush where the sun touches. Icicles drip steadily from the roof, tiny streams of water cutting paths down the cabin wall. At first, the sound is strange, almost startling, after months of muffled silence. But soon it becomes a rhythm, steady and soothing, the earth beginning to breathe again. Work grows easier in small ways. The woodpile still shrinks, but each trip outside feels less like a fight. The axe no longer bounces off iron-hard logs, but sinks deep with a satisfying thud. Water cut from the creek doesn't freeze solid before you haul it back. Your fingers, though still stiff, thaw quicker by the fire. These are small victories, but each one builds the sense that winter's hold is slipping. Inside, moods lift. The children wake with more laughter than complaint, their cheeks flushed from sun that now streams briefly through the window in the afternoons. You catch yourself humming while mending clothes, the tune carried without thought, born from relief you didn't know you were holding. Even the food tastes different, not richer, not more plentiful, but brighter somehow, as though the light itself sweetens each bite. But the return of the sun is no instant salvation. Storms still come, snow still falls, nights still stretch long. The cold has not surrendered, it only retreats in small steps. Yet each dawn arrives earlier, each dusk lingers later, and in those minutes you see the end written ahead. Spring is not here, but it is coming. You stand in the doorway one evening, the horizon painted in colors winter had long buried, rose, amber, violet streaked across a wide sky. The sun dips slow, casting its glow over snowdrifts that shimmer as though they are jewels instead of graves. For the first time in months, you feel warmth touch your face, faint but real, and you close your eyes against it. The return of the sun is not just the changing of a season. It is the proof that survival has meaning, that every frozen morning, every hunger, every fire tended through the night has carried you here, to this moment. Out here in the Wild West, the sun always returns, and with it, the promise that you, too, will see the land alive again. Death does not wait for spring. Out here in the Wild West, when the cold is at its worst, the earth itself hardens into stone, and still you must face the final duty. A neighbor, a child, a traveler caught in the storm when life slips away in winter, the living are left to wrestle with the cruel task of burial in frozen ground. The news comes quietly. A knock at the door, a face lined with frost. Words spoken low. He's gone, she's gone. The baby didn't make it through the night. Grief mixes with dread, for mourning is only the beginning. To bury the dead in winter is as much a battle with the land as with sorrow. The ground is iron. You take a spade, strike it down, and the blade rings sharp, bouncing back as though you struck rock. Again and again you try, sweat freezing on your brow, breath tearing at your chest, until the futility of it breaks you. Then you turn to fire. Logs are dragged, flames built on the chosen ground, burning hot for hours until the earth softens just enough to break. Men work in shifts, axes and picks, splintering soil hardened by months of frost. Each inch gained feels like victory, carved with pain and patience. Sometimes the earth will not yield. Then the body is laid to rest in snowbanks, wrapped in quilts, covered deep in drifts to keep safe from wolves and scavengers until the thaw. Families mark the place with branches or stones, a promise to return in spring and finish what could not be done in winter's grip. It is a cruel mercy, but it is all that can be given. Funerals are brief, there is no lingering outdoors, no long sermons against the wind. Words are spoken with trembling lips, prayers cut short as hands numb and tears freeze before they fall. The coffin, often rough and plain, is lowered into the narrow pit, snow and frozen clods thudding hollow against the wood. The mourners stand close, not only for comfort but for warmth, their breath mingling in the icy air, their silence heavier than the snow around them. For the children, death in winter is both mystery and terror. They ask why the ground smokes when fire is set to it, why the body is wrapped so tightly, why no one sings long hymns like in summer. You hush them, explain as gently as you can, though the truth presses harder than any storm. Winter takes without pity, and sometimes it takes those least able to fight back. The walk back to the cabin after a burial feels longer than the walk there. The weight of absence settles heavier than the snow on your shoulders, yet chores wait. Animals still need feeding, fires still need tending, mouths still need food. Grief has no space to linger when survival demands your hands. And so you work, because work is the only thing that keeps sorrow from freezing you still. Burials in winter mark the frontier as much as cabins, fences, and fires. They are reminders carved in the earth or in the snow that life is fragile, that the land is merciless, and that endurance is not always enough. Yet, even in this, there is a kind of defiance. To bury the dead in winter is to say, we will honor you, even when the earth itself resists. And when the thaw finally comes, the ground softens, and the graves are finished. The prairie whispers back what you already know, that survival here is never certain, and that every breath taken is a gift stolen from the cold. When the snow piles high against the door and the wind howls like a beast circling the cabin, faith becomes more than belief, it becomes survival. Out here in the Wild West winter, when medicine is scarce, food thin, and hope thinner, people cling to prayer, to scripture, to the rituals that give meaning to the endless cold. Faith does not banish the frost, but it steadies the heart, and sometimes that is enough to keep you alive. The Bible rests on the table, its leather cracked, its pages worn from years of hands turning them by lamplight. You read by the fire, voice low, the words rolling into the silence, a rhythm stronger than the storm outside. Children gather close, their faces lit by flame, their eyes heavy but fixed on you. The verses become more than stories, they are anchors, pulling the mind away from hunger and fear, reminding everyone that suffering has always been part of the human lot, and that endurance is its own kind of grace. Hymns rise too, sung in voices rough from smoke and cold. At first, the sound is thin, almost swallowed by the cabin walls, but then it swells, each verse steadier, stronger, until the air hums with melody. The wind may roar, rattling shutters, but inside, voices stand against it. Singing is warmth of another kind, spreading through the chest, carrying the spirit through nights that would otherwise feel endless. Faith also finds its place in the smallest gestures. A cross carved into the doorframe, a prayer whispered before breaking the ice at the creek, a hymn hummed while mending clothes. Each act is a way of saying you are not alone, that even in the frozen silence, something greater watches over you. For those who traveled west, leaving behind family, towns, and churches, these small rituals stitched familiarity into a land that often felt foreign and unforgiving. Neighbors, when the weather allows, gather for worship in cabins or barns, benches carved from logs, lanterns casting halos of light. Breath steams in the cold air, and the preacher's words cloud before him, but still the people sing, still they pray. Sometimes the service lasts only minutes before the chill forces everyone home, but even a short gathering binds the scattered souls of the frontier into something stronger than isolation. Not all faith is scripture. Some carry charms from their homeland, tokens said to guard against illness, prayers spoken in old tongues passed down through generations. A sprig of sage hung by the window, a pouch of tobacco offered to the wind. Beliefs mingle on the frontier, each one a shield against despair. For some, faith is simply the act of rising each morning, striking flint for fire, and trusting the sun will return. The cold tests belief as much as it tests flesh. When sickness lingers, when food runs out, when frostbite claims fingers and toes. Doubt creeps in like the draft under the door. You find yourself asking why, asking if the struggle has meaning. And yet, each time you kneel by the fire, bow your head, and whisper words into the silence, you feel steadied. The cold may not relent, but your spirit stands firmer for it. Faith in the cold is not about miracles. It is about endurance, about carrying yourself and your family through another night, another storm, another hunger. It is the light of the lamp, the warmth of song, the strength of words spoken into the stillness. Out here, where the winter seems endless and the land uncaring, faith becomes the one thing the frost cannot take. At first it comes quietly, a trickle of water down the cabin wall where icicles once hung stiff and sharp, a softness underfoot when you walk to the barn, snow sinking not with a clean crunch but with a wet collapse. The thaw begins almost unnoticed, but soon it is everywhere, and with it comes a new hardship. For if winter seeks to freeze you solid, the thaw seeks to swallow you whole. Snowbanks that once stood like fortresses shrink by the hour, their edges darkening, their weight sagging into pools. Paths you carved all season vanish into slush, boots sinking ankle-deep with every step. The frozen silence of winter breaks apart into sound, the drip of meltwater from roofs, the creak of sodden fences, the steady rush of streams bursting free. What felt safe and still now becomes restless and wild. The river swells first. Ice cracks like rifle fire, echoing through the valley as dark water pushes upward, eager to reclaim its place. Chunks of ice ride the current, grinding and crashing against each other, a floating army marching downstream. Crossing is impossible now. The frozen bridge that carried you through winter turns back into a threat, wide and furious, eager to take whatever dares its banks. Around the homestead, mud spreads like disease. Where drifts once piled, black earth seeps up, thick and sucking. Each step into the yard pulls at your boots, threatening to rip them off your feet. Wagons sink to their axles, horses stumble and strain, cattle slog through mire that clings to their legs. Work slows, every chore made heavier by the weight of mud dragging at every limb. The thaw exposes what winter buried. Fences flattened under drifts appear again, twisted and broken. Tools lost months ago emerge rusted and useless. Even the bodies of animals claimed by the cold sometimes surface, grim reminders of storms endured. You walk the land and see scars everywhere, the price winter has carved into the earth, now laid bare by the melt. Yet the thaw also brings life. Tiny shoots of green push through muck, defiant against the lingering frost. Birds return, their calls sharp and bright, breaking months of silence. The air, though damp and heavy, smells of earth again instead of endless ice. Hope rises with each breath of it, faint but undeniable. The thaw is messy, brutal in its own way, but it carries the promise of something more. Spring. Still, promise does not feed you. The mud makes travel harder than snow ever did, turning every errand into an ordeal. You slog to the barn, shoulders aching, boots caked in muck so heavy each step feels like lifting stone. The cattle bawl for grass not yet grown, their ribs still sharp from winter's hunger. The children track mud inside, their laughter tinged with frustration when chores leave them soaked and filthy. The thaw tests patience, grinding it thin, reminding you that survival is never clean, never easy. But you endure, you patch fences where they stand, you dig trenches to drain water from the yard, you scrub mud from boots and clothes until your hands blister, because beneath the muck lies the future, and every drop of meltwater flowing away is winter's grip loosening. The thaw is chaos, a season between death and life, and though it leaves you caked in mud, weary and worn, you accept it gladly. For mud means movement, and movement means change. Out here in the Wild West, mud is the sign that you have survived the cold and that the earth, at last, is beginning to breathe again. When the last drifts sink into the earth and the prairie shows green once more, you find yourself looking back. The Wild West winter has passed, but its shadow lingers. etched into your bones, carved into the land, whispered in the silence that still clings to certain nights. Survival brings relief, yes, but also memory, the kind that never truly lets go. You remember the mornings when frost clung to the window panes, when breath clouded thick in the cabin air, when even rising from bed felt like an act of defiance. You recall the endless fight for firewood, the ache in your arms as you split log after log, the sting of snow against your face as you hauled them through drifts higher than your waist. Each stick you fed into the stove was not just warmth, it was time, another hour bought against the cold. Hunger, too, leaves its mark. You will not soon forget the thin meals stretched from beans and cornmeal, the taste of jerky chewed until your jaw ached, the prayers whispered over kettles of broth made from scraps. The memory of children's wide eyes as you divided portions smaller than you wanted weighs heavier than any storm, and yet those same eyes still shine, proof that the meager food was enough, that you endured. The storms live on in your mind as well. You can still hear the blizzard's roar, the way it rattled shutters and pressed against the cabin walls like a living beast. You remember digging out from drifts that buried the door, shoveling until your arms trembled, fighting just to carve a path to the barn. You recall the fear when the wind howled so loud you thought the roof might tear free, when the snow blinded so thoroughly that the world outside ceased to exist. And then there are the smaller moments, quiet but lasting. The silence of the prairie under snow, broken only by the crack of a branch or the distant cry of a wolf. The glint of starlight on ice, so sharp it felt otherworldly. The sound of hymns sung in a cabin warm with firelight, voices soft but steady, rising above the storm outside. The feel of children huddled together beneath quilts, their breathing slow and even as the night stretched long. These moments soften the edges of hardship, reminding you that even in the coldest season, life found a way to glow. Now, with the sun higher and the air warming, you walk the land and see the marks winter left behind, fences broken, barns weathered, tools rusted, graves dug in frozen soil. Each scar tells the story of struggle. But among them, grass pushes up green, streams run swift again, and the prairie hums with birdsong. Life returns, as it always does, carrying with it the weight of what was endured. The memory of winter does not fade quickly. It lingers in the way you stack wood higher than before, store food more carefully, mend clothes with extra stitches. It lingers in the cautious glance you cast at the horizon when the sky darkens, in the way your breath slows when the first frost returns. The cold taught you to respect it, to fear it, but also to endure it. In the end, the memory of winter is more than hardship, it is proof that you stood against the storm, that you fought hunger and frost and silence, and lived. Out here in the Wild West, survival is never given, it is earned, season by season, winter by winter. And though spring warms your skin and summer will soon ripen the fields, you carry the memory with you, a reminder etched deep. You endured, and because you endured, you are still here.